Welcome into the EMAW Online podcast. I'm Mason Voth, the managing editor of EMAW Online, your rivals K-State home, for all the news and notes on the Wildcats that you want. Hey, it's been a while since you've heard my voice as well, mainly because there hasn't been much going on for K-State right now. And that's what I'm here to talk about today is I think that there is a lot of people getting very antsy about the situation with the basketball roster again. I totally get that. There's 3 open scholarships left right now. The only addition that K-State has made in the portal so far this year is Tyler Perry. And there's a lot of questions that are left out there as to what's going on with K-State basketball. I think there's also a lot of emotions out there that people are trying to cut through and trying to understand. Is it okay that I feel this way, or should I look at it from a different angle? All of these different things. And I just kind of wanted to take some time to address those and kind of lay it out how I see things going right now. Because, look, I've been pretty open about this. When I need to put on the hat of, okay, I'm impartial here. I'm just trying to give it how it looks and keep people in tune with a lot of things. And I'm trying to be the more journalist mode. Okay, that's what I'm going to do. But also, I'm very similar to all of you. I went to K-State. I want nothing more than to see K-State succeed in a lot of things. I'm not shy of saying that. Now, I'm not going to be openly rooting for them in the press box or something, or going and wearing the plethora of K-State shirts that I have in my closet to those things. But that's all there. Like, that is all still there. And I still want all of that. And I think that it's one of those deals right now where there are a lot of K-Staters that are conflicted on how they should feel here, where I think you can strike a balance. I think it's good to be critical of things that you love and things that you believe in and whatever else. That's just a healthy thing to do, because even the things that are the most perfect scenarios for you are still not always 100% perfect. There are going to be flaws in everything that you do or everything that goes on around you. So let's dive into this situation with the K-State basketball team right now. This is a team that last year had a lot of success with guys that they pulled in the portal. Now, at the time, we didn't know that any of them outside of Keontae Johnson were going to be a major success. And even in terms of Keontae Johnson, we didn't know what that was going to look like, because he hadn't played in a real basketball game in basically 2 years. So there were a lot of things there that were going to have to be kind of figured out. We didn't know, but it worked out. Keontae Johnson was an all Big 12 player. Naquan Tomlin, who they got from the JUCO ranks, really worked out for him and was, he has a lot of room to grow, and he is a big part of what K-State is going to do this upcoming season. He has to be if K-State wants to have any success, especially right now with how they look in terms of where the roster is. And then Desi Sills was a guy that came in, served his role really well, and by the end of the year, K-State realized they had to have him in the starting lineup during the NCAA tournament, and they went on this Elite Eight run. So the portal was really good to K-State last year. There is no doubt about that. And I think because of that, it set the expectations really high that K-State was going to be able to replicate some of that success again. In addition to that, now this coaching staff that everybody around college basketball loves also has the on-court success to kind of pair with that. So everybody would look at it and say, man, this makes a lot of sense. K-State's going to be a hot place in the portal. They're going to dominate it. And what we found out is they've been in the mix for a lot of quality guys. And that is an important thing to at least have, in that you are in the race. You are in the game. But they've only been able to land Tyler Perry, and a lot of other guys have gone elsewhere for various reasons. Is it NIL? Is it because K-State didn't have as much interest in them as was publicly thought? Or, is K-State just truly still second and third behind some of these places? That is also true. It's just one season, and even though there are a lot of great things that K-State did, I think that's the first thing to keep in mind here is 1 year like this does not trump everything that all these other programs have set in place. I mean, K-State has lost some guys to Baylor this year. Jerome Tang knows very well that the Baylor stuff has been set in motion, and they have been building to this point where they can clean up high-level freshman recruits or transfers. That has taken 20 years for them to build. Now it's gonna take less time at K-State, I think, because K-State was on far better ground than what Baylor was when they took over, and the success was much more immediate at K-State. But that's still something to take into consideration with everything that's going on there. Before I dive into the things that are concerning about K-State basketball, because I don't think the sky is falling for K-State. And I think that the people that are on the side of trying to be much more positive about the situation, you're not wrong for doing that. Maybe more of us should have blind faith in what Jerome Tang and his staff is going to be able to do. But at this point, you have to be realistic, and we have to go off of things that we've seen in the past to tell us that it seems unlikely that with the current situation that there is going to be success that compares to last year in any way. Like, there still need to be some significant things that happen here and a lot of things that have to fall into place. Here are the good things, though, and why even if K-State doesn't get to a certain level or get certain guys that the expectation would have been at the start of the transfer portal season, they still have a great recruiting class. One of the top 25, 30 in the country for this upcoming year. Two guys that are 4 stars that are going to be really good talents, and then a very high 3-star Michaela Rich that has some serious upside. All of those guys can project right now to serve a role at K-State at some point in time. In addition to that, they do have just the one transfer addition right now in Tyler Perry, but that's still a big deal. Tyler Perry was still a really big get. Depending on who you look at, where they had him ranked as a transfer, some had him really high, like top 5 type. Others had him a little bit lower. The transfer portal rankings, I don't know that anybody really has a good set of them because it all just kind of comes down to what you're looking for and what you need. But Tyler Perry, to me, is a guy that I identified not this past year, but the year before that, when I was still working on the radio in Wichita, and I occasionally would have to host the Wichita State pregame show. And North Texas came to Wichita, beat Wichita State, and Tyler Perry was a guy that preparing for that show, I was like, man, that is a dude I would love to see in the portal and end up at K-State. And I think he's a fantastic player, 20 points a game type guy, going to shoot at 38% from 3. Tyler Perry it was a massive get. That is still significant. And that's the one thing that I would say here is look around the country. And I know that, at this stage and being an Elite 8 team, people want to compare K-State more so to the Kansases and Baylors of the world. In reality, K-State is going to be much more along the lines of that team in the tier just below or wherever you want to factor them in, and getting one very high-level transfer is really important. And now K-State is still big game hunting here, and that's why they're missing some. They are still going and looking for those guys that they think can be legitimate, immediate difference makers in a significant way to the team next year. And at some point, all of those guys are going to be gone, whether K-State gets a few more of them or they don't get any of them at all. And then that's when K-State will shift to some of the guys that are left over in the portal. They'll decide, okay, we probably don't want to fill up the roster with 3 of those guys, but we do need some depth on this roster. So if we can find 1 or 2 guys that we can identify that does 1 or 2 things pretty well, and they can fit into this roster, that's where they'll start to move to. But the Tyler Perry thing should not be overlooked. It is still a significant deal. And I know it's been a long time since that commitment came, so it's tough to keep that positivity at a real high level right now because of it. But that is something that at this stage should still make you feel good about what K-State did in the portal. Now, here are why there are concerns and why I would lean more towards disappointment with how K-State has fared in this process. And again, we don't know all the reasons why they have failed. For each player that they go after, it could be a different reason. It could be that they just don't see K-State working out for them. It could be the NIL thing, which is a significant deal at this point in time. It could be a lot of reasons. But for K-State, the concerns are there are 3 open scholarships right now. And when you look around at what is left on the roster, what you have to bank on being successful for K-State this upcoming year is a lot of guys making leaps and steps that we just don't know if that's going to happen. It seems likely for a few guys that it does happen. And for in the case of Tyler Perry, that it does translate over. He's just a flat good basketball player. It doesn't matter that it was Conference USA and he's going to the Big 12. He is a legit basketball player. But even a guy like me who loves Tyler Perry's game and thinks very highly of what he can do, I do have to be realistic and say there may be an adjustment that gets made there. And even though he's still probably going to be very productive and very good for K-State this year, we have to consider that there is a chance that Tyler Perry does not reach the certain level that he had at North Texas, production-wise, efficiency-wise, all of that stuff. That has to be factored into it. So think about that. Naquan Tomlin, he has to be the second best player on this team for K-State this upcoming year as it stands right now. And ultimately, if things were really to work out for K-State, Naquan Tomlin would use this summer, get a lot more refined in a lot of areas, and he has the athleticism and skill set to beat K-State's best player. And if that's the case, that's probably best case scenario for K-State next season is if Naquan Tomlin is the best player. The issue is, even though I thought Naquan Tomlin played some of his best games at K-State last year in the NCAA tournament, it's not easy to project him to take that leap. It's one of those deals where it's just kind of wait and see mode. And that's the concern here is that a lot of these guys, you can see the path to making something like that happen where a jump could happen. But until we see it, we just don't know for sure that it's going to happen, even more so than like past circumstances with certain guys where it seemed a little bit more obvious that, okay, now you're going to start to move up and it's just going to be this clear progression to what you do. Like Nigel Pack, for example, was a guy that after that freshman year, you looked at and said, okay, that was a really strong freshman year from him. We can see that it's going to get better. Now, in the case of Nigel Pack, it got so much better so fast that it rose to a level that I'm not sure I anticipated sophomore year. And part of that comes down to the fact that he had absolutely minimal talent around him. So he did have to be the guy a lot more times than not. But still, that's one of those deals. Look, there's a path for Cam Carter to be a really good player on this team. And that's the thing that I think we always tried to talk about in the middle of the season when we addressed maybe some of the issues that Cam Carter had. He was a pretty limited player this year. He was very streaky. If you look at some of the advanced metrics that are out there from various college basketball masterminds, Cam Carter did not rate very well this year. And you could see that with your eyes. Like there were just going to be some games where Cam Carter was going to give you nothing if you were K-State. And even though some of the averages worked out to being okay, he needs to work on consistency. But here's the thing. If Cam Carter improves his three-point shooting a little bit, if he can become a more consistent finisher around the rim, if the defense even just takes a little step forward, Cam Carter turns into a player that is legitimately meant to be on the floor for K-State a lot of the time and can really contribute in a major way, as opposed to last year. Hey, the rules of basketball say we need 5 guys on the floor. Cam Carter, get out there. David Gasson was kind of in that boat too, where there's good for Gasson. He is a good rotational type guy to have on a team, but I think he kind of is what he is at this point. I don't know that we see a massive leap from him in any way. There are just some things that maybe he could tie up and be a little bit better at, and that would take away some of the true negatives that are out there, where he can kind of be he ends up on the floor a lot, whatever it might be out there. So those are some of the things that have to be taken into consideration with what we see. Then it also turns to this team is going to be relying a lot, as it stands right now, on guys that have not played this level of college basketball before. So Taj Manning is that guy, redshirt freshman. Now, all indications are that he was really impressive last year in practice, and this staff really does like him. I anticipate we see a lot of Taj Manning this year, but again, that's wait and see. We don't know what he's actually going to look like in the heat of battle. Jarrell Colbert is another guy that even though he had a year where he played at LSU, he didn't play a ton, and he came to K-State in what these coaches thought was probably an underdeveloped state from his time at LSU. Makes sense. LSU was a terrible team. His coach got fired, and he came to K-State redshirted. I really like Jarrell Colbert. I expect significant contributions from Jarrell Colbert. But again, he's another one of these guys that is very unproven at this level and is probably going to be thrust into a much bigger role than what you would like. Then we get into this point, and I said, hey, K-State had a very strong recruiting class for year one of Jerome Tang. That is true. That is a really good thing. They brought in guys that you can project and think they could really turn into something special at K-State. The problem with that is they are three freshmen that aren't the highest of high recruits. They are not of the caliber that K-State is going to see of freshmen that are playing for USC in that game that starts the season. We know that. That's just how it's going to ultimately end up looking here. Because if you go and look, like we know Bronny James is going to play immediately, probably contribute. Isaiah Collier, the number one recruit in the country, he'll play right away, contribute, all that type of stuff. But it's not very common for, guys will come in and play and contribute. That is a fact. But it's not the most common thing in the world for guys to come in and have this ultimate immediate impact. And I went through this because this has been a talking point. If you've been on the EMA online message boards and you've been looking, there's been a lot of back and forth on this, on what the future could kind of look like for K-State basketball. And here's the deal. I went through and I looked at this last night, and I kind of built this off of what Gabe did for us back when David Castillo committed, because he's trying to break down, okay, does the impact of David Castillo look like? Obviously, it's monstrous in terms of recruiting right now, and in the future, by the end of his K-State career, it seems like it's pretty significant then as well. Like, he is a really talented player, and sidebar, he's going to be playing at Sunrise Christian just outside of Wichita this upcoming year, so he's going to be in the state of Kansas a year earlier. But back to this whole conversation on freshmen. I went back to 2007 because K-State basketball since 2007 has been one of the better programs in the country. Multiple Elite Eights, multiple Big 12 titles, all this stuff. They've gone to the NCAA tournament pretty consistently in that stretch. So you started that year of Huggins and go forward, they've been really good. If you look at what true freshmen have done at K-State, and all I did was go to look to see how many of them had averaged 8 points per game, at least 8 points per game since 2007. There have been 56 true freshmen on the K-State roster. Only 10 of them have been able to come through and deliver 8 points per game. That is a significant deal. Those players were Nigel Pack, 12.7 points per game as a freshman in 2021. 2016, there were 3 of them. Dean Wade, 9.9 points per game. Barry Brown, 8.6 points per game. Kamal Stokes, 9.4 points per game. And then you have to go back to 2014. Marcus Foster, 15.5 points per game. That was 2014. 2012, Angel Rodriguez, 8.3 points per game. 2009, Jamar Samuels, 8.3 points per game as well. And then 2008, Michael Beasley, 26.2 points per game. Jacob Pullen, 9.7 points per game. And then 07, Bill Walker's true freshman year before he got hurt, 11.3 points per game in his small sample size. Obviously, the thing that sticks out there is that 2 of those guys were the highest of high recruits in Beasley and Walker. That is significant. But it just shows that even though a lot of those teams were pretty well equipped with talent before them that was established that could carry the load, like you think about 2016, Dean Wade, Barry Brown, Kamal Stokes, they came in their freshman year. They had DJ Johnson. They had Wesley Iwundu. They had Justin Edwards, who knew what he was doing. Stephen Hurt. Stephen Hurt is a guy that if he was on any other team, he has a little bit of a role there. I was always a Stephen Hurt guy. I don't know if I actually should have been or not, but shout out to Stephen Hurt. Like, there were guys, even though those teams were bad, now that 2015-16 team, they were improving and getting better. But the way that I see this thing is like they had room to get in there. Those were legit freshmen that played and contributed because that team had some guys that were established. So that was a big deal, but that was an anomaly to have three of those guys that year. Obviously, that helped us project and show that that team was capable of winning a Big 12 title down the road, because if the three of them as freshmen could come in and do something that in the last 10 seasons before them had only been done 6 times, and then half of that occurred in 2016, that's a significant deal. But it just seems unlikely based off of what has been the norm at K-State for those guys to step up. And the other thing that I would point out here about some of these guys that came in and did what they did, Nigel Pack, 2021, that was not an NCAA tournament team, obviously. That was a bad team. Dean Wade, Barry Brown, Kamal Stokes, 2016, that was not a tournament team. That was a bad team. Finished right around 500. Had to play that first night of the Big 12 tournament. Not good. Then you go back and everybody else was fine. Bill Walker, the injury thing and a lot there, probably should have been an NCAA tournament team. Kind of bogus, whatever. They ended up in the NIT. That was a fine team. That was legit production from Walker on what I will call a good team. But most of the guys on this list, now 4 of the 10 freshmen, they had those 8 points per game or more on teams that didn't play in the NCAA tournament and weren't very good teams. And, 2009, Jamar Samuels, he did it in a year on a team that did not go to the NCAA tournament. So that's essentially 6 of the 10 did it on non-NCAA tournament teams. And that's why my concern here is this. I don't doubt that 1 or 2 of the 3 freshmen that come in are going to play a lot this upcoming year and contribute in some way. But what the ceiling of a team that has that happen is seems to be much lower, and the history would tell us that, because 6 of the 10 instances where a freshman has come in and averaged just 8 points per game, those teams have not made the NCAA tournament. Now, in addition to what Gabe did for us back in April when Castillo committed, he went through and he compared the Jerome Tang, Scott Drew, Baylor era teams and said, okay, how many times has a freshman come in and immediately contributed with double figures? That's all he was asking for. So I did 8 points per game because I felt like that was more fair. Gabe, because he was talking about a very high-profile recruit in David Castillo, he went with 10. Totally fair. It's just another bucket for these guys, whatever. It's only happened 4 times at Baylor. Now, the one thing that Gabe excluded was the rocky start at the get-go from Baylor. I mean, they took over for a team that couldn't play conference games. We know everything that happened in the Baylor basketball situation. And if you say, well, that's kind of messing with his data a little bit, that's not fair. Okay, you can say that. Maybe there would be more freshmen that immediately contributed. But you know what those freshmen did when they immediately contributed on those early Baylor teams? They sucked, and they didn't play in the NCAA tournament. They didn't play in the NIT. They were a bad basketball team. And I don't think K-State is going to be a bad basketball team next year. But right now, there are a lot of question marks for K-State moving forward. And to tie a bow on Gabe's research about everything, of the 4 freshmen that came in and averaged double figures at Baylor their first year as true freshmen, 3 of the 4 were consensus top 10 recruits. So essentially in the category of Michael Beasley and Bill Walker, those were the guys that could only manage 10 points per game at Baylor as true freshmen. Now, Baylor in some of those years, like they were able to get to a very veteran place. That's the goal that K-State has in mind that they want. That's why a guy like Taj Manning redshirted, why Jarrell Colbert redshirted. They weren't just going to feed these guys to the wolves immediately. They saw that if we give them time to develop and get them to a much better place, that is going to benefit us and benefit them in the long term. And as the K-State's coaching staff is able to build up this program and kind of replenish this roster, they are going to be able to get to a stage where they're not having to scramble and fill all these roster spots every year. Now, it changes a little bit in 2023 because of the era that we're in. So at Baylor, it wasn't quite as easy to transfer. So maybe you have to deal with a few more. But eventually, the goal is going to be to get to a place where K-State is only replacing a handful of guys on the roster every single year. And say it's 3 spots, you do it with 1 or 2 transfers and a really good high school recruit, or vice versa, however you want to do it. But that is where I just want to, I want expectations to be tempered and for people to understand that, yes, RJ Jones, Day-Day Ames, Caleb Rich, 1, 2, or 3 of them could come in and have some type of contribution in 2023 and 24 season. But if that's the case, in all likelihood, this is a K-State team that is going to be a bubble team, and history would show us that this is a team that is likely not going to be an NCAA tournament team because of what we've seen with 6 of the 10 previous instances that it happened. The only freshman to average 8 points per game or more to make the NCAA tournament as true freshmen were Pullen and Beasley in 08, Angel Rodriguez in 2012, and Marcus Foster in the 2014 season. So I'm not trying to be negative just to be negative because I want to see success, and I believe that there is a path to it. And last year, I believed early, before the season started, that K-State was going to be a much better team than what some thought, and that turned out to be true. Now, they were even better than what I thought they could be. I think that is the same case this year, but that's just because of feel and what I kind of believe there. But you still have to break down from an analytical side and use your head a little bit to say that the odds are not in K-State's favor as it currently stands for them to be a team that is able to get at least to the level of, like a 5 or a 6 seed in this NCAA tournament. This feels like a team right now that they're going to be battling kind of on the bubble. Will they get in? Will they not? And we'll just have to see how it goes. So there's still a lot that has to be filled out here. And this is one big, long way of saying that if you're in the camp of, hey, they're going to be fine, we got to believe in this staff. They know what they're doing. They did it last year. They can do it again. They've got talent on this roster. It's going to show up. You're absolutely right. You are in a good spot there. Like, that's fine. You should stay there. I don't want to talk you off of that, but I want you to be prepared that there is a chance, and history suggests in a lot of situations a much better chance that isn't the case, and that it does come down to, I'd like to see him add, like the camp of people that I like to see him add, at least a couple more guys. I'm a little disappointed that they've only gotten Tyler Perry and they've whiffed on so many dudes, and that it's looking like we're going to have to rely on true freshmen and unproven dudes at the D1 basketball level to come in and help us out here. Both are totally fine, and one is based much more in what history would suggest to you, and the other is based much more on what vibes and what this staff did for one season last year did. And I'm not going to tell either one of you that you're wrong, because I can see both sides. Again, I feel with these guys over here. I feel with the guys that say believe in this staff because of what they did last year, what they can do. There is going to still be some real talent here that on the right path, you could see them popping off. But my head and what I can see has happened in the past is on the other side. And I that's why I'm torn. I see both sides. I've got a little split personality for this K-State basketball team this upcoming year as it stands right now. I would probably treat it like this, if I'm walking down the street and a random KU fan is talking crap on the Cats, I'm going to give it to them and give them the positive angle. I'm going to give them the good feels angle because, hey, you don't get to talk smack on my school. You don't get to do that. But if I'm talking with other Cats, other K-Staters, I'm probably going to go with my head over here and the historical angle and everything else and say, well, actually, we should probably tone down what we expect from this team right now and just let it see how it plays out and what comes about, because it's, no, you can't pick on my brother. You can't say something bad to him, but I can, it's just how the world works. So that's a lot. I probably confused a lot of you. You're like, what side is he on? What does he actually believe here? I'm just trying to lay out both sides and explain that whatever side you fall on, you're not wrong. You are not wrong, and you shouldn't feel bad about what side you're on. And I'm not trying to fault you for either side of it. I just want to make sure that people aren't expecting a repeat of this past year, or even, maybe that Marcus Foster team is the expectation that freshman year where they were an 8-9 seed, lost as a 9 to Kentucky in the first round, second round back then, dumb NCAA tournament stuff. we'll just have to wait and see. But that right now feels like what their ceiling is. And I think you would take that this year ultimately. If K State, in what could be a drop off year because of everything that has gone on, I really think that that would be significant and important for them to not miss the NCAA tournament a year after last year. And once you get to the tournament, anything can happen, as we saw in 2018 with the Wildcats. So that's where I would say right now I see the ceiling being. But in terms of getting to that, that means that it could be a very rocky Big 12 play because the Big 12 is even better this year with the addition of Houston. Cincinnati has gotten better. I know the last couple of years in the American haven't been normal Cincinnati basketball, but Wes Miller's doing some solid things there. They added some new talent in there. I still think K-State is better than Cincinnati as it stands right now, but it's going to be a fascinating watch to see how things go moving forward. A couple of other notes just before I get out of here for you. Go check out on the site right now. If you missed Monday Thoughts from yesterday, a lot to break down there, including what I talked about with David Castillo coming to Sunrise Christian to play his final year of high school basketball. All the guys for K-State basketball and football, the freshmen, are on campus now. There is a portal name that is mentioned in there that K-State is trying to target. We'll see where things go. A lot of other stuff, and then also a look at the official visit dates because those are getting ready to start in full force for K-State football, trying to get some guys in, see where things maybe head for them, and then we'll kind of keep going on from there. So be sure to take in everything at EMA Online, and we will be sure to kind of keep you up to date. Probably do this again next week with whatever new info we have on anything K-State related. Go in, talk about it a little bit. Non-K-State news that delayed me from recording this morning. I was getting ready to come down, record this, and then the PGA Tour Live Golf stuff broke. They're merging. It's a whole deal. Read about it, watch about it, whatever. I will say this. I think that this is ultimately probably what ends up happening with the Big 12, Pac-12 thing. Both sides want to kill each other, say, we're better, no, whatever, you suck. And ultimately, they're probably going to have some kind of merger, or at the end of the day, the Big 12 welcomes in a ton of the Pac-12 teams, and only like one or two of them are left out fending for themselves. But that's for another time and everything else. So that will do it for this edition of the EMA Online podcast. I'm Mason Voth. Thanks for checking in, and we'll be back. Talk again next week.